Have you ever wondered to yourself, hey, what would it be like to translate Pokemon mechanics to a beat 'em up? Well, Umbrella has an answer for you, and the answer kicks ass. And I think it's important to be clear right off the bat that Pokemon Rumble is definitely a beat 'em up. There are RPG mechanics because after all it is still a Pokemon game, but you should never view the RPG mechanics as the ultimate deciding factor in a battle. The basic combat mechanics are incredibly simplistic. Each Pokemon you can play with has a total of 2 move slots for a maximum of 2 moves to be used in battle. And there are no additional combat mechanics such as dodging or blocking. This is genius for 2 reasons. Firstly, it preserves the feeling of traditional Pokemon battles now in beat 'em up format, and secondly, it makes the game far more accessible to a casual audience. And the most famous Pokemon mechanic, capturing fellow Pokemon, is equally simplistic, though it's been reworked to function with beat 'em up sensibilities. When fighting Pokemon, you have a small chance to topple them instead of simply defeating them, and if a Pokemon is successfully toppled, it will plummet to the ground where it can be picked up and added to your arsenal. Each Pokemon you capture comes with 1 or 2 moves of its own. The moves are of a certain type and have certain attributes that mirror those in the original traditional Pokemon titles. For example, type weaknesses are still a thing, and there's been a great deal of effort put into preserving the unique mechanics of each individual move. I mean, yeah, of course, Poison Sting still poisons your enemies, but that's a given. But I'm talking about more creative shit, like how Barrage has been reworked as a projectile that bounces off Pokemon like pinballs. Or how Rollout is a devastating tackle move that hits up to 5 times but sends the player wildly out of control. Or my personal favorite, how U-Turn acts as an absolutely devastating blow where your Pokemon then immediately zips backwards to avoid any counterattacks. It's true that you need to have some understanding of the traditional Pokemon mechanics and the movesets inside them to see why these creative spins are so, well, creative. But even putting aside the beauty of adapting traditional RPG mechanics into beat-em-up format so creatively, there are still countless moves to use and many of them feel unique. This is a great selling point regardless of how familiar you are with the Pokemon license, and it creates immense variety for such a simplistic combat system. Every enemy Pokemon you encounter, while weaker than you, also benefits from this varied moveset. It's one of the few examples of a beat-em-up where the enemies have technically the same capabilities as you, but instead of making the game more repetitive, it makes it even more varied and interesting. And I say technically the same capabilities, but don't worry because Umbrella didn't spontaneously forget this is a beat-em-up instead of traditional Pokemon. To further balance the fact that you're massively outnumbered at all times in the game, while the player character can spam their moves as much as they want, the enemy Pokemon have quite a wind-up. They visibly flash for almost a full second before unleashing their move, and while this may at first seem too easy, you quickly realize the challenge when you see just how many you'll be facing at once. In a further bit of balancing and generosity in the player's favor, there are different types of telegraphs for the different enemy moves. Sometimes the ground will light up where an enemy move is about to strike, for example. How the moves are telegraphed depends exactly on which move the Pokemon is planning to use. But their significant wind-up before striking and their telegraphing ensures that every attack in the game can be dodged. You have sufficient time to avoid everything. At no point does it feel like the game is cheaping you out, because you have adequate time to dodge everything. It ultimately comes down to your skill, and the combat system is so simple that it's easy to become skilled at Pokemon Rumble. They managed to create a simplistic, accessible combat system with hundreds of varied moves that can all successfully be dodged just by basic player movement. That's impressive, and again, the genius here is that they achieved this simply by not overstuffing the game with additional mechanics. And because everything is so simple, it has a powerful resolve. For example, they felt the need to include boss battles as this is a beat-em-up, but the boss battles just feel like a natural extension of the regular fights you get into. Sure, the boss is much larger than the other enemy Pokemon and has far more health, but he uses the same moves that every other enemy Pokemon has access to and the same moves that you have access to. Everything feels connected, accessible, easily understood. And this is all without sacrificing the depth that traditional beat-em-ups normally offer. while simultaneously expanding on traditional beat-em-ups with the Pokemon license's unique mechanics and ideas. Why is this game so fucking good? Why does it kick so much ass?